This week, why do we link to stuff that's behind paywalls? What the hell, man? But first, I'm Quinn Emmett, and this is Important, Not Important Science for people like you who give a shit. You can hit subscribe right now to get this essay and my conversations with the world's smartest people who've already answered the question, what can I do? Every single week. You can find the email version and links to everything at importantnotimportant.com or right in your show notes. And now for today's big question, which is a user, reader, listener question, whatever. We're occasionally asked why we link to scientific journals, news outlets, and sometimes even opinion pieces that are behind paywalls. And in a world where HBO Max or whatever it's called and Spotify and everyone else raise prices what feels like once a month, it's a great question. Our newsletter is free. Why the hell do we make you click through to something that costs money? Is that prohibitive? Disingenuous? Does it create too much friction? Does providing, in our free newsletter, a brief synopsis of an otherwise paywalled article or post or whatever take away from that publication's ability to make money off of their work? Does that brief synopsis do remotely enough work to explain what otherwise required 500 to 5,000 words from an actual journalist or expert in their field? How could it? And are we even qualified to write that synopsis? To all of it, I say, maybe. But first off, we don't make you click through to anything. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Since the beginning of time, I have wrestled with not only what news to cover, but from which publications and journalists. How much opinion to include versus straight reporting or data journalism or peer-reviewed journals, and especially ones that challenge my priors. And I have honestly swung dramatically back and forth on exactly how much context to provide for each news item, from barely any in a clickbait headline to a couple hundred words each. If you've been around here for a while, we have been on quite the journey together. Today, in Willow's excellent hands, you are welcome, folks. The synopsis for each news item is closer to just enough context that you, an extremely busy human who trusted us with your emails, don't have to click through, but not enough to essentially save you a click or whatever and rob that publication of the fruits of their labor, and of course, to forsake you, a curious shit giver, the opportunity to go much deeper. That's where we have found ourselves. Because, you see, we care deeply about your desire to go both deeper and wider on what's happening today, how we got here, and what it could mean for tomorrow. And to that end, we built VibeCheck, our extremely popular members-only news dashboard, so you can read everything we're reading, or pick and choose, or filter by category, whatever. But even in the free Monday newsletter, or the essays, people who can afford to click through to the publications we cite and trust the most are able to dive far deeper into a category or even subcategory like maternal health or Black maternal health or clinical trials. Like I've said, I've been wrestling with all of this for a long time, and you've seen it happen live. And while having Willow on board and running the main newsletter has been indescribably helpful, it's still not easy. And that's because, as you may or may not have heard, and for a variety of semi-villainous reasons, the very newsrooms we stand on the shoulder of are very, very close to disappearing. And that's very, very bad. The current state of journalism is not great, Bob. The Google, Meta, and to a less applicable extent, in this case, Amazon trifecta, have sucked up all of the advertising dollars everywhere. And we don't need to rehash how print advertising fueled the 20th century publishing industry, because when was the last time you read something in print? Newsrooms bet it all on SEO, on Google Ads, on the Facebook news stream, and then pivoted to video, pivoted to WhatsApp channels, only for random AI scrapers and not so random AI scrapers to come in and steal the last shreds of our best journalists' best work. If you are unaware, much like making a movie or TV show, journalism costs money. There are not only the capital costs, but salaries and payments to real people to do real hard work. Giving it away for free in any way was a huge mistake, which set readers' expectations in the proverbial toilet. People and companies that steal it, repurpose it as their own, or pirate it, can go to hell. Because now, when the very truth is at stake, trusted, quality journalism is absolutely essential. We have developed and run society on systems so complex that we barely understand them. And so the challenges we face are equally complex. On the one hand, capital and profits continue to be hoovered up by very big tech monopolies, very little of which actually goes to the workers, and private equity apparently eats all the rest. On the other hand, well, here's a thread linked in the newsletter about inequality in America, which is being covered less and less because local journalism doesn't have the resources to cover it, and the big papers are owned by billionaires. So look, we spend a lot of energy and time imploring you to take action on the local and the state level, or province, or whatever, shout out Canada, because that's where you can get the most bang for your buck and where you'll feel it the most. Local journalism is a perfect example of this kind of action, and unlike, for example, colleges and churches that own a shitload of land but don't pay property taxes, you're putting your dollars directly into the local economy. Now, here's a full disclosure I have disclosed a million times before. Before the moon split off from the earth a bazillion years ago, I helped build the case for and then actually build the paywall at the Financial Times, a feature that's been very successful for them. And now, of course, the caveats, which is that the FT is a business-focused paper, which is also why we, at the same time, moved business to the front page and world news to the back half, which was controversial. But the point is, most of the readers were already expensing the paper. So those same readers would just expense the digital version. It was their job to read the FT. So yeah, we were early, but at the same time, the paper provided information and perspective that, one, you could trust, and two, you really couldn't get elsewhere, so it was kind of a cheat code. But then, later, maybe not. Because since then, publications the world over have transitioned from majority print to majority online, seeking at first to generate revenue from some truly shitty display ads, and then new players enter the ZERP scene fueled by VC dollars, social media, scale, and yes, ad dollars. Now, you don't get that kind of scale by charging people for your content. Your content had to be accessible to everyone all the time, until they expanded too quickly and untenable VC expectations went unrealized. And lately, money became so much more expensive to get. Endless variations on paywalls were tried, including micropayments, which people generally fucking hate. Over time, fewer people read the news. Conglomerates like Tribune bought up and then downsized integral legacy newspapers. Magazine publishers like Condé Nast, another place I briefly worked in their heyday, and wow, those places were forced to finally reconcile a history of absolutely hemorrhaging money with how to bring in ads when tens of thousands of fewer readers were resubscribing every year, driving ad rates into nothing. Since 2005, the U.S. has lost 1/3 of its newspapers and about 2/3 of its journalists. So today's title could have been, "What the fuck?" right? Today, very few actual newsrooms of any size rely solely on advertising dollars because they simply don't have the scale to do so and still pay actual humans to produce high-quality content. And if they do, they may either be a small shop of just one or two or part of a much larger operation. Your beloved Substack about underground vegan jazz music in Brooklyn may exist for now as a free subscription, but that may be because it's a hobby or maybe even a side hustle. And at the very least, with any kind of paywall, could probably only barely support one human writer, to say nothing of the expenses of actual reporting in another country or, healthcare. Enter curators. People like us. Our entire thing here stands on the shoulders of the world's best journalists. So yes, we will cite inline the best quality journalism when we can find on a given subject, whether or not there's a paywall involved. And again, we really used to wrestle with this, but I do much less so today, because even if only 5% of you click through and read a free article or run right into a hard paywall, and only 50% of those readers end up subscribing, maybe because we cite that place all the time or whatever, that's money in those media outlets' pockets. That's more journalism for you and for me. just by doing this particular job, it turns out it's my responsibility to do that. This practice may be less convenient to you, hence the emails, but in exchange, we've provided an extremely considered synopsis, or a collection of them really, to give you most of the info you need for the week. In 5 minutes or less. We don't do a perfect job, but Willow's doing it a lot better than I ever did. And if it was constantly shitty, well, you wouldn't be here, would you? But over a decade of free news means we are not only less inclined to pay for it, we have a very difficult time telling real news from mass mis- or disinformation. A long time ago in an essay I wrote called What Do You Want? I wrote, disinformation, like its much less intentional cousin misinformation, is as old as we are, like viruses and weapons. But technological progress has made their scale and impacts considerably more devastating. Look at it this way. If our ancestors couldn't trust each other, even after a nice afternoon, we'd eventually fight over necessities like shelter and water. Skirmishes started and usually ended small, very small. But fighting with weapons evolved from fists to clubs, swords to spears, bow and arrow and muskets to automatic weapons, artillery, missiles, and finally, nuclear weapons. That evolution traces a lineage where real-world deployment becomes exponentially more deadly over time. In parallel, thankfully, the most powerful weapons have actually been used relatively less over time, because of ideas like mutually assured destruction, the ultimate fuck around and find out scenario. And thankfully, viral pandemics don't happen very often, even if we're definitely due for more. And yet, in the 20th and 21st centuries, disinformation around weapons and viruses has cost millions of lives. In all cases, the self-awareness to understand the part we play, right? A species constantly seeking out what we each want instead of what we all need is absolutely necessary. Choosing what you give a shit about, who you'll trust to tell you about it, and whether you'll pay them for their services, like you pay someone to do your dry cleaning, that's your responsibility. Now, we may promise, or only ask, 5 minutes of your time with the Monday newsletter, well, a little more for these essays, but we don't cite these sources simply for our own integrity, though that goes a long way. I actually do hope you'll click through, and not just to eventually, having been worn down by the Guardian's hero tool, buy a subscription or donate, but also to get more educated on the issues facing us today. You signed yourself up for our work, so we assume you're the kind of shit giver who's already going to vote, etc., etc. You're among the most activated citizens on the planet. Our work can make you significantly more empowered to do your best work, whatever the hell that may be. But again, we're just a stepladder on the shoulders of journalists at places like The Markup, Stat News, ProPublica, the 19th, 404 Media, Rest of the World, Capital B, and elsewhere. We could never replace their work. We simply point you towards it. Yeah, it's a little ass backwards, but going much deeper on data ethics or women's health or environmental justice will actually help you go broader, to connect the dots and begin to see the systems for what they are. You are simultaneously giving yourself a more nuanced, ongoing understanding of, say, bodily autonomy and state legislatures, but also, unavoidably, voting rights, heat protections, nursing shortages, gerrymandering, and paid leave. And again, this is where our tool Vibe Check comes in, of course. It's our fire hose. It's tagged by us and curated for you to go an inch deep or a mile wide or both, whatever your pleasure. Add it all up and you can be significantly more confident in your ability to not only participate, but truly engage in discourse and decision-making at home, around the dinner table, in the boardroom, group chat, or school board meetings. In an essay called How to See the Forest, I wrote, "This is our place in the climate transition, to identify not only a problem's pressure points, but also the compound action, related kinds of action across people and time, that will weaken a dangerous power system or reinforce an essential piece of infrastructure, like water or insurance or air." And it's this, but journalism, investigative, local, data, whatever. To be clear, I'm not asking you to do the work, though if you can, you should. I don't understand how the brain works. I wrote about that too. But that doesn't mean I'm not happy to be an extremely small cog in the complex machine of humans that are integral to real scientists slicing up gray matter on the regular and going, what the fuck is this? When you share a link to the 19th on your Slack or WhatsApp or Blue Bubble thread, you're, before anything else, introducing the 19th to a group of people who might not even know it exists. And further, your site visits, your ad clicks, your donations and subscriptions help reinforce not only that publication's bottom line, but their ability to do more and better work, to hold more power structures accountable, and to release more marginalized people from those. You're saying, I want to be part of a society or a culture that values truth and inclusive reporting. By the people, for the people. And we've come a hell of a long way. We have a hell of a long way to go to build a radically more informed and better, more resilient and equitable future. It's all right there in front of us. But I need you to participate. Anybody who wants to respond about individual action versus systemic action can just unsubscribe. Because I'm not force-feeding you another little ditty about compound action here, the cumulative, ever-expanding impacts of individual choices amplified through relationships, communities, online and not, and of course time, because it's fun. It actually is fun to me. It's exciting as hell, because look at how far we've come. And by we, I mean the people who came before us who, besides storming Normandy Beach 80 years ago this month, also subscribed to their local paper. And in that paper, they read about wars beginning and protested and ending, about depressions and businesses going out of business, and later about walking on the fucking moon, and more. And it may have been a local paper, but it was a two-way lifeline to their community. It was an instrument for compassion, participation, and change. Now, for decades, kids have been aghast at their parents making their way through the paper yet again. But that ritual was not only a public good, it was the expectation. Our parents and grandparents might not have attended every city council meeting or actually watched Cronkite live every night, but they sure as shit read about it in the paper, a news delivery device that said, this is what's happening now, and by who, and to who. Sometimes the news may make you say, well, isn't that jolly? And other times it might make you say, what in the ever-living fuck? It is your responsibility either way. It's our collective responsibility act on those impulses. Either way, you can't be expected to take action if you don't know what's happening outside your home, around you, and around the world. And that's why we provide sources from so many perspectives and from across the world, paywall or not. Because we have to not only look outside our own homes, but around our neighborhoods to pay teachers more, to expand education, to provide books and community health clinics, to plant tree cover where there is none, to build and operate more pools and free swim lessons, to expand SNAP and Medicaid and reduce the administrative burdens of both, to banish ultra-processed food and forever chemicals and fucking lead pipes, but also fight for mandatory parental leave and paid leave for salaried and hourly jobs, to not just let 70,000 childcare facilities close, leaving at least 3 million more kids without reputable care or any care. And again, we have to go further, beyond our state borders, beyond our national borders, to Africa and India, to the continents and billions of young people poised to reshape everything about our economies and societies in coming decades, but whose children will, yes, grow up with GPS and Wi-Fi, but often still without clean water and refrigeration, and with sea level rise. Great news, though. History is littered with examples of people doing exactly these things that you and I need to do. So I do not expect you to click through, much less to subscribe to every single paywalled news outlet, journal, or independent newsletter or podcast. If you all already did that, maybe journalism wouldn't be facing an actual market failure at the hands of, yes, big tech, changing priorities and algorithms, and a long culture of free news, private equity, and impatient and often frugal billionaire owners. Not any one of these, but everything, everywhere, all at once. But the hell if I'm going to stand by and watch it burn, or become as inequitable as everything else, where only the New York Times game section and a bunch of independent bloggers can make a living, with no room left in the middle. The Atlantic's billionaire owners can subsidize the time to turn things around, with much more expensive writers and subscriptions to, quote-unquote, make something worth buying. But billions haven't saved the LA Times from huge cuts, and every day it seems like democracy might actually die in darkness after all. This, as the most vital sources we have are either suing OpenAI or partnering with them, because the cash is good now. Down the road is somebody else's problem. I stand by our sources, and I'm committed to promoting them so that I can continue to rely on them. I need them. So that journalism becomes a viable career again, so democracy survives and is maybe even improved upon. So climate solutions and public health wins are shouted from the rooftops and tried in more places for more people. In an exciting turn of events, more and more states, probably because half of U.S. counties no longer even have a single local news source, also see journalism as a public good and are treating it that way, scraping together a host of incentives to actually, subsidize journalism the way it subsidizes fossil fuels. We need them to go further, to complement your new monthly subscription with encouragement and support for unions and newsrooms so reporters can have and then feed families. How can governments do that in such a polarized world when NPR is already under threat? I'm not 100% sure. There isn't some new business model coming to save newsrooms this time. It's down to you and me, our wallets or Apple Pay or whatever, and our informed engagement, putting pressure on policymakers and stakeholders everywhere to save what is arguably the most important part of our society, our ability to know the truth and to fucking do something about it. Here's your relevant action steps. Number 1, donate to our friends at the 19th, a diverse indie nonprofit newsroom reporting on gender, politics, and policy. They do incredible work. Number 2, volunteer with documenters to fill the gap in local media coverage and make sure public meetings are on the record. Number 3, get educated about what journalists can do to help journalism survive, from getting involved in policy to unionizing. Number 4, be heard about helping journalists and publishers receive fair compensation from tech platforms for use of their content, and ask your representative to support the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act. Number 5, invest in companies that align with your values that you might have heard about in your newspaper using Fennel. That's it for this week. If you've got feedback, questions, opinions, just like prompted this essay, send them in to questions@importantnotimportant.com. Of course, hit subscribe to get next week's essay and my conversations with people who help you answer the question, what can I do, right in your feed. To go deeper, visit importantnotimportant.com, and thank you for giving a shit.